Hey there. So my name is Jackson Rohrbaugh. I am a master sommelier based here in Seattle, and I am here to enjoy some time live, talk about wine with you. We're going to drink some wine, we're going to hang out, and just wanted to spend some time with y'all. And thank you to Sip Magazine for asking me to be part of this and asking me to be here with you all. How's everyone out there holding up? Good? I'm going to show you what I'm drinking in a minute. I'm going to get that started here. But I'm also curious while we're getting going here. I'd love for everyone else to chime in what they're drinking, what they're doing. Would love to hear what everyone has in their glass. So, figured it's time to get started. To everyone who's tuning in, cheers. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining Sip Northwest and hanging out. And wherever you are, whether that's stuck at home, stuck out of town, we're happy to have you here. So I'm starting right now with a Chardonnay. This is a grape coming from Willamette Valley, and this is from a producer called Lingua Franca. So when I think of Willamette Valley Chardonnay, it is something that hasn't really gotten a lot of attention over the last 10-15 years compared to, let's say, Oregon Pinot Noir or Oregon Pinot Gris. I absolutely adore the Chardonnay that's coming out of the Willamette Valley right now. I think it's balanced, it's beautiful. There's producers making wines that are just utterly stunning and beautiful, and they read way less Napa Valley Chardonnay and way more White Burgundy, but they're also their own thing. They're not necessarily a wine that's defined by a single place or another origin. It's much like Washington Syrah in that respect. I mean, Syrah from Washington doesn't taste like Syrah from anywhere else, and we're going to taste a Washington Syrah in a little bit. So we have one person, let's see. So Ryan Schiebel is drinking Fort George City of Dreams. Love it, from Edmonds, Washington. I love Fort George. I've been to visit the brewery down in Anacortes, or sorry, not Anacortes, but Astoria, and I think it's delicious. Cheers, everyone. Yeah, Kristen. So again, I want to reiterate, if you're just joining us now, I'm drinking 2017 Lingua Franca Avni Chardonnay. On the back porch, hanging out, enjoying a little bit of fresh air. And when I think about Oregon Chardonnay and what makes it unique compared to Chardonnay from, let's say, Burgundy or Chardonnay from Napa Valley, like the traditional old school big ripe style of Napa Valley Chardonnay, what I think is cool about Oregon Chardonnay is the precision. These wines are higher acid, they're really refreshing, they're bright, they're very food friendly with things that are lighter like seafood, oysters, whitefish. Hey Kanchan, hey Aaron, how's it going? Hi everybody. Okay, Kristen's got Quello Chardonnay from Willamette Valley. Awesome. We got a to Z Wineworks Chardonnay, very cool. What else are people drinking? I want to hear. About 3 out of 27 people have chimed in, so very nice. I also got my tiki drink because if I was to live broadcast and not have a tiki drink somewhere at hand, then it'd be criminal. That's just how I roll. So Aaron's drinking Patricia Green Cellars 16 Durand Vineyard Chardonnay. Awesome. So if you're just joining us now, my name is Jackson Rohrbaugh. I'm a sommelier based in Seattle, Washington. I have shout out to American Northwest. I love it. So my background is working at Canlis on the restaurant floor. Was a sommelier at Canlis for almost 10 years. Spent some time as the assistant wine director, brief stint as wine director. Had a really great time, great connections. So restaurant sommelier is my background. And so what I did in the last couple of years in transitioning out of the floor was start a company. And my company is a way to get wines straight to your door that are vetted and tasted and approved, wines that have really good stories. And okay, Christine Ackerman's drinking Willamette Valley Dijon Clone Chardonnay. Cool. Sevilla Cellars Tempranillo, very cool, very cool. Oh, love Big Table Farm Chard, yeah, love it. And Alaram Syrah, good to hear from Bruce. So I started this company called Crunchy Red Fruit, and what we do is we send out 6-bottle boxes every 2 months with wines that are curated. There's been some really epic Washington wines and wines from the Columbia Gorge in the last couple boxes. We had 2013 Gramercy Cellars in our first box. Our last box had Lunasa from Smock Shop Band. Just really beautiful wines from Washington, but we do wines from all over the world. Here's what one of our boxes looks like. It's kind of like this, and it comes to your door and it says, "Let's pop some corks," and comes sealed and everything. It is $189 including shipping to anywhere in the continental U.S. Just our way of putting the things that we think are worthy of attention, that have great stories, that are compelling and taste great. It's our way to showcase those wines. Okay, we're back. Cool. So Lingua Franca, the winery, was started by a guy named Larry Stone. He's a master sommelier and one of the OG master sommeliers. He used to work for Charlie Trotter's in Chicago and lots of other places, Rubicon in San Francisco. So just someone who knows the business, knows great wine, someone really special. And he started this winery called Lingua Franca and got a guy named Thomas Sauve to be his winemaker. Thomas is from France. He's a winemaker who's intimately in connection with what it means to make great Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. He happened to work harvest at Domaine de la Romanée-Conti. So now we have a guy who's learned how to make wine at DRC or Domaine de la Romanée-Conti, making Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in Oregon, which is pretty cool. And if you don't know that name, Domaine de la Romanée-Conti or DRC, that's one of the most expensive, rare, impossible to get wines in the world, and frankly, one of the best wines in the world. Wines that can be $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a bottle even. So Thomas, a guy that worked harvest there, is now working in the Willamette Valley making wine for Lingua Franca. So I highly recommend them. I think they're worth checking out. Even though they're very new to the game, I think they have a wealth of experience and understanding. I mean, Dominique Lafon, he's this great white Burgundy maker. He consults on their project. So I think it's worth checking out Lingua Franca. Would love to hear from some other people here. What other Oregon Chardonnay producers do you love? And if you're following along, check out in the comments and see some other really good Chardonnay recommendations from Oregon. To me, the other producers that come to mind when I think of great Oregon Chardonnay, Lingua Franca is obviously up there. I think Walter Scott is doing a really good job. There's another producer called Grand Moraine that are making beautiful. Yeah, Conscience says Walter Scott. Yep, I agree. Adelsheim. Yep, Adelsheim's classic. They've been at it for a very long time in Oregon, making awesome wines. Love Adelsheim. If you guys haven't had the wines from Grand Moraine yet, though, they're fantastic. Bergstrom. Yep, we had someone mention their Big Table Farm earlier. I think they're great. If you guys haven't had Flaneur, Flaneur is awesome, both for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Definitely a leaner style. Stoller Family Estate, absolutely, love it. There's some great mentions. I think Chardonnay, 15, 20 years ago in Oregon, the clonal material that was being planted was not suited properly for the Willamette Valley. It was California, warmer climate material, all the clonal material. So when I say clonal material, the stuff that's planted in the ground, the actual vine selections that are planted, and some of them aren't meant to grow in Oregon's climate. But now we've started to see some clonal material get picked out that's really suited to Oregon's climate. So the wines that are coming out right now, the Chardonnays, are zippy, are bright, are crisp, and very food friendly, and just balanced as they could be. So I highly recommend. So Aaron asked, what should we be looking for when we taste Chardonnay? This is a tough one because Chardonnay is a blank canvas type of a wine grape. It's a wine grape that is characteristically less flavored, right? When you think about when you think about Riesling or Sauvignon Blanc or Viognier, those are grapes that have lots of flavor that they bring. Viognier is very floral and bitter. Riesling is floral and limey and bright and high acid. Chardonnay is kind of one of those things, you could plant it anywhere and it's going to take on both the flavors of the place that it's grown, and it's also going to take on the flavors of the winemaking that you apply to it. And so when we think about Chardonnay, it's in a great place, in a perfect place for Chardonnay. If you don't mess with it too much, Chardonnay can really create something special and transmit that terroir. It's almost like Chardonnay is almost like an amplifier that you can plug terroir into, and Chardonnay kind of like boosts the signal for you, if that makes any sense. So when I think about great classic Chardonnay from most of the world, I think about apple notes, green or yellow apple, depending on where it's grown. I think about lemon and lemon curd. In some respects, in some classic Napa Valley Chardonnays, you can get butter. There's nothing wrong with getting butter, at least I don't think so, Kristen, but is the butter the sole flavor happening? That's more the question to ask. Is this a wine that actually says the word butter on it and is available on a store shelf for $6.99 retail? Chances are there's been some things done in the winery to make those flavors, to make those flavors pop more, that don't have anything to do really with quality winemaking or transmitting terroir. They're more about fixing something to make it more consumer appropriate, if that makes sense. Great, so that's Chardonnay in a nutshell. Chardonnay is your blank slate. Chardonnay is your amplifier. Chardonnay is your white canvas, basically to paint anything you want on it. So what do I think about unoaked Chardonnay? Unoaked is a little bit of a misnomer sometimes, because some of the best expressions of Chardonnay have very little oak. So a lot of people have released over the last 10-15 years, there's been a lot of release of unoaked Chardonnay, and saying basically that that's better than oaked Chardonnay. And I don't necessarily think that either oaked or unoaked is better, but I do think that finding a balance in your winemaking to where the oak is not the thing providing the flavor, because you could still make unoaked Chardonnay, but then you can also let your wine go through malolactic and become a popcorny, buttery mess by letting that go on too much, or harvesting your grapes too late so they're ripe and over the top. So unoaked doesn't necessarily mean quality. It's just a distinction of saying this isn't going to have toasty, vanilla-y flavors. But some of my favorite Chardonnays are oaked, but it doesn't mean that they're oaked to the end of time and filled with nasty, over-the-top, spicy flavors. It means when you think unoaked, it's more of a hands-off winemaking style. When you think about Chablis, those wines, a lot of them are unoaked, but they're not unoaked as in they don't see a barrel. A lot of them do see a barrel. They see a neutral barrel. And so it's hard to slap a label on something as broad as oaked or unoaked. All right, Joel, drink your Corona. Just don't cough on us. That's all I ask. So yeah, we could kind of go talk all day about unoaked versus oaked Chardonnay and kind of end up in the same place. It's down to the winemaker making a precise, beautiful wine that expresses something special from the place, not so much whether it's oaked or not, because a judicious, very light, very patient use of oak can create a really special wine that you don't taste a lot of oak in, if that makes sense. I agree. Fight Corona with Corona. All right. I think now might be a cool time to open up the red wine, if you guys want to do that. So what we've been drinking is this. It's Lingua Franca Aubny Chardonnay from the Willamette Valley. And we're going to move next to this winery. It's a winery very close to my heart because I actually worked harvest here last year. This is Curlew Cellars, Black Rock Cellars Syrah from the Yakima Valley, or Black Rock Vineyard Syrah from the Yakima Valley. Black Rock Vineyard's right next to another very well-known vineyard called Boucher Vineyard. And when I think about Washington Syrah, I'm going to tell you what I think about it. But first, I'd love to hear what you have to say about Washington Syrah and maybe what makes it distinctive versus other places in the world. And then I'll offer my thoughts on that. So right now I'm going to pop this bottle, get it going. Thankfully I didn't have a foil to cut, just had to go right in. drinking minor Pinot Noir. Love to hear that from Jacqueline. Côte Bonneville Syrah, awesome. Love Carrie and all those wines they make. So when I think about Washington Syrah, and I'll let anyone who wants to chime in, go ahead and chime in. If you're just joining us, my name's Jackson Rohrbaugh. I'm a sommelier from Seattle. Spent most of my career at Canlis. Now I have a company called Crunchy Red Fruit, which we're going to talk a little bit more about when I'm done talking about Syrah. First, I need to free up some room in my glass. Beautiful. So Melissa Ackerman Miller says Owen Rowe Ex Umbris. Love that wine. Killer value for how good that wine is. So Kanchan makes a really good point that Washington Syrahs bring both deep concentrated fruit and savory notes. I couldn't agree more. I think when I'm looking at what makes classic Syrah? Classic Syrah is not all savory, and it's not all fruit. So when I think about a great wine from Côte Rôtie or from Crozes Hermitage or Cornas, the homeland of Syrah, the place where that grape is from, where it grows wild, okay? When I think about those wines, I don't just think about pepper and smoke and spice. I think about that plumminess, blackberry character. Wendy Willis Miller says smoky blackberry leather, absolutely. Savory with notes of tobacco, yep. And, put any of these things put any of these Washington Syrahs next to a Côte Rôtie, and chances are the Côte Rôtie or the Cornas or the Hermitage is going to show a little bit more dryness and a little bit more earth. Washington Syrah has this thing that you have this plumminess, this deep fruity character that goes along with the savory notes. If anyone wants to answer for me, what is the winemaking technique that boosts up green notes and savory notes and funk in a wine when you're making Syrah? I'd love to hear it. It's not just Syrah, it's used for other grapes too. I'll wait for someone to chime in. Tim Wright says Syrah is elegant. You're darn right it is. Yeah, so Kanchan jumped in. Thank you, Kanchan. Whole cluster, yes. So whole cluster is when we talk about Syrah, whole cluster is absolutely the thing that is a winemaking decision, that when you're a winemaker and you're trying to make a certain style of wine, doing whole cluster Syrah or not doing whole cluster Syrah is a huge decision that influences profoundly the end result of what you're doing when you're making Syrah. So if you do whole cluster, what that's going to produce are savory notes, funky notes, peppery notes, and you can still get those when you make a Syrah, but whole cluster has the effect of boosting up that overall savoriness and overall funk and pepper and spice. So yeah, so this is 18 vintage, so very young. It's a 2-year-old Syrah, but it is super fragrant and expressive. And this is one reason I chose to actually work harvest at Curlew last year, is because everything is produced with wild yeast only. Okay, so they'll foot stomp the grapes. So that's another thing that's really fun is you when you take in a ton or two of Syrah, they come in the big buckets and the bins, and you dump them into a fermenter. So kind of like a 6 foot by 6 foot by 6 foot steel cube that's open. And all the grape bunches go right into the fermenter, and then instead of just leaving them there, someone jumps in. So I would jump in, and Sammy and Steven, who are part of the Curlew winemaking team, or Ryan Crane, the winemaker, we'd jump in the thing, and we hold the edges of the bin, and we'd stomp, and you just stomp and stomp and stomp, getting all that wine, all those wine grapes crushed. And they're still attached to the stems at that point, and you don't take the stems out. So basically all those green stem material, all these green stems are hanging out in the wine, in the juice, soaking up the juice, and also giving their flavor back to the juice as they sit and ferment. So basically whole cluster is what you're doing, and yeah, it is fun to stomp around on the grapes, for sure. And Kristen asks why stomping versus punch downs. I need to change positions here. So when you're stomping grapes, that's the initial crush. So you want to get the grapes crushed in the first place in order to release the juices from the grapes. Then about two and a half, 3 weeks you actually need for the ferments to finish. So the wines are going to be sitting in bins. The sugars are going to be eaten by the yeast as the wine is fermenting. Okay, and then you do need to do punch downs because you have a level. You have this big cap of grapes sitting on top of all this juice underneath, and so the juice is just going to sit there. It's going to be fermenting, and the wine skins and solid material are going to be fermenting as well, but you need to mix them up, both for color and extraction and tannin and flavor, all those things. So you basically need to stomp them or crush them initially in order to release the juice out of the grapes. But then when they're sitting in the bin, you need to mix the solid material and the liquid material constantly during the fermentation in order to get everything mixed up and produce more flavor in your final wine. You don't want to skimp on extraction because that's where all your tannin comes from. That's where all your color comes from. That's where a lot of what makes your wine comes from. So there's a lot of work to do in winemaking, and the initial crush is a big part of it, but also going forward, either punch downs where you take that solid material on top and shove it down into the juice and kind of mix everything up, or pump overs is another way of doing it. You take the juice out of the bottom of the tank and you stick a hose and you hose it over all the solid material. But you guys should go, when it comes time for harvest this year in Washington, go check out a winery. Go observe for a day or two, or see if you have a friend who works at a winery where you can actually go help either stomp or sort grapes or do stuff. It's fascinating and you learn a ton. It's so worth it. Highly recommended it. So if you're just joining us now, I'm drinking Curlew Cellars 2018 Black Rock Syrah. My name is Jackson. I'm a sommelier based in Seattle. And hey, if you guys at any point have questions for me about what it's like to be a sommelier, work at a restaurant with a bunch of super fancy schmancy wines, I'm happy to answer those questions too. And happy to answer any questions about Washington Syrah or Oregon Chardonnay, whatever you guys want to hear about. But while you guys are thinking of those questions, I really quickly want to talk to you about what we're doing with my company, Crunchy Red Fruit. So this is what our both those questions I'm going to. So Carrie Campbell, I'm going to answer your question first really quick. It is not too early to drink it. I just popped it. It's delicious. I think this wine will last for some years. I think it'd be great, but it just has a lot of energy right now and it's ready to go. So I'm into it. So what does it take to become a sommelier? A lot of people have this concept of sommeliers being like airdropped in from like a finishing school in Geneva, and we come pre-programmed with like our monocle and our like mustache and like a really rude attitude. But that's just like couldn't be further from the truth for what it takes to be an actual sommelier. So let me answer that, Tanis. I'm going to answer that question in a little bit. The answer is yes, and I'll get to that in just a second. To become a sommelier, you have to be good at restaurant, okay? If you take a poll of 15 sommeliers, basically ask all of them and you'll find out that like 12 of them started as dishwashers and maybe the other 2 started as bussers or started in the kitchen. I think people have this misconception of sommeliers as like elitist people who don't really understand the inner workings. But really, if someone becomes a sommelier by understanding how the rest of the restaurant works, because if you're a sommelier and you can't go back and wash dishes, or can't hop back in the kitchen and cut onions, or can't go up to the front desk and seat a table, then you really don't belong in that position. You should be able to do everything in the restaurant and be a total commando as it pertains to taking care of guests and showing them love and giving them hospitality. And so you'll find a lot of people who make their way to the sommelier profession because they've already mastered other parts of working in the restaurant over years in the business. And I think that's what makes the best sommelier is not just someone who knows some stuff about wine, but someone who actually loves taking care of people, and then combine that with knowledge and the ability to navigate a really complex wine list or even a small, very tightly run, very trim, beautiful wine program. and that's what it means to be a really great sommelier. What pertains to certifications, whether that's WSET or ISG or the MW program or the Master Sommelier Diploma, certifications are a way to raise your skills, push yourself, become better at what you do, but they are by no means a certification that you're good at what you do. But usually by the time someone pursues that higher level, they've already worked in restaurants a long time. In fact, to be invited to sit the Master Sommelier exam, you have to have years of experience. It's not even like a question. That's just something that's assumed by the time you're getting it. So you couldn't just come off the street and take that exam. You have to be invited to take it, and you have to have restaurant experience in order to take it. So I like to think of Master Sommeliers or Master of Wine or WSET Diploma or CSWE. Those are people who love that subject so much that they decided to devote their own time to studying it just so they could be better at serving people. And that's hopefully the message being told. Not that sommeliers are snobby or rude or elitist. Like that's just there's no room for that, and there's already enough snootiness out there. So I just really care as a sommelier that people get taken care of. If someone's in my restaurant and they're sitting there, I really want them to have a good time. Like I care deeply about that. I'm not trying to pull one over on them and sell them an extra expensive bottle of wine. I want them to have a really good time, and that sometimes means taking someone who's willing to spend $95 and take them to a bottle of wine that's even better than the one they were looking for. That's $65. It's about taking care of people, and that's playing the long game in your career and not the short game. Process of being a sommelier, okay, again, you work in a restaurant, be good at what you do, and learn about wine because you love it, and the opportunities will follow. I think you need to invest in your education. You need to find someone who will mentor you, someone who will push you, someone who won't let you settle for less. So thanks, Terry, for joining us. And then great. So Tanis has a question. So I started Country Red Fruit, my company, as a way to say, hey, there's lots of really awesome wines that I love sharing with people and would love people to be able to taste, but they don't necessarily ever see the light of day in a grocery store or even in a wine shop sometimes, or even on a restaurant floor. Or they might just be very limited in their distribution. So I wanted to find a way to get cool wines to people, and have those wines accompanied by music pairings, accompanied by food pairings and recipes, and give people an idea of what these wines are all about, and teach and have fun and learn together with people as we open these bottles together. So that's what my company Country Red Fruit is. Yes, I agree with Chris, and don't be intimidated. Be willing to tell us all what you want and what you're willing to spend or what kind of wine you like, but also be open to trying new things. I think is really important. So this is Country Red Fruit. This is what our normal box looks like, but we've also created a 3-bottle Seattle Hospitality Relief box. We started it a couple weeks ago, and Country Red Fruit is committed to giving 80% or more of all of our proceeds from this straight to the Seattle Hospitality Emergency Fund. These are funds that are going to go straight to out-of-work hospitality workers who have been sidelined because of COVID, and have had their restaurant jobs either furloughed or cut or just been laid off because of it. And so what we have is a one-time purchase thing. You can do it as a gift. You can do it as your own box. You can buy more than one of them. It's 3 bottles. It's $79. That includes delivery right to your door, and it is going to benefit Seattle hospitality workers who are out of work. It's our hope that we can help give back to the restaurant industry that's given so much to me in my career, and a lot of my friends who are out of work and struggling and suffering right now. It's my hope that we can do something to alleviate that. However little our donation is going to be, we're going to do our best to give as much as we can, but every little bit helps. And even though our company is just getting started out, I felt like it was the right call. So to answer the question from Sip Magazine, the main structure of Country Red Fruit is a club, or we call it a circle. So join the circle and you get 6 bottles every 2 months. So there's only 6 shipments a year, and everyone who's on the club gets the wine at the same time. It's $189, and that includes shipping anywhere. So if you're in Florida, it's $189 per shipment. If you're in Washington, it's $189 per shipment. And these are 6 bottles, really awesome, beautiful bottles that we've selected. A lot of wines, they're like in every box so far, there's been a wine that there's not any more of. So I'm choosing things that are very limited, that you just can't go out and buy at a store, that are impossible to get. Not for every single one of the wines, but for a lot of those, they're rarer bottles. And so that's a thing you can join. You can join the circle anytime. Just go to our website, crunchyredfruit.com. And then also, if you feel like supporting hospitality workers and also getting wine in the process, please go check out our website. It sounds like Kristen's going to put the link up. You can get a box of 3 wines for $79. That includes shipping right to your door. So it'll be delivered, and they're wines that we pick. We have a very strict criteria. Weirdly, I like really pretty labels and good design, so I am a little bit picky about that. So everything looks nice. I also really care that the wineries we use are small wineries, not big multinational corporations that rely on sometimes shady tactics to get a more chemically sterilized product into the bottle. I wouldn't say we're a natural wine club, but I would say that natural wine is important to us, and we really care about wines that don't have lots of additives and don't have lots of extra tricks added on. And basically that's what we do, and that's how we pick our wines. We care that there's no chemicals added in the vineyard or in the winery, and we want to work with small distributors that are owned by small families and small wineries that are owned by families, and support the little ones. So that's important to us. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. We'd love to hear... Okay, so Kristen wants to know what a natural wine is. And if there's a bigger can of worms to open up in the wine industry right now, I don't know of one. So, yeah. I like where you're coming from, Tim. So before I get into answering what a natural wine is, which is a little bit of a shady question to thread the needle on in 5 minutes, I'm going to show you what I'm drinking. My name's Jackson. I'm a sommelier from Seattle. If you're just joining us, we're drinking Curlew Cellars Syrah from Yakima Valley right now. Curlew is actually in Seattle, so if you're in Seattle, once this COVID thing blows over, you should go check out their tasting room. They have wine for sale right now. They're also giving wine straight to hospital workers and people on the front lines of fighting this epidemic. So I highly recommend you check them out. Ryan Crane is the winemaker. He does an amazing job. I love the wines. I worked harvest there last year. So Kristen, to answer your question, what is a natural wine? To get into this, it requires a sense of patience and a sense of being willing to learn. As soon as you natural wine store in Silver Lake. Okay, cool. I hear that. As soon as you start to apply terms to things, it becomes easy to get dogmatic about why those things are what they are or aren't what they are. So in applying terms like natural wine or conventional wine to certain wines, I think it's really important to realize those are just terms, and it often doesn't necessarily encapsulate everything that happens at a winery. So I think no matter what we do, it's very important to look at wines holistically. So not just whether they don't use cultivated yeast. So a lot of people say, oh, natural wine is anything made with wild yeast. Well, that's very reductive to just place it on that. Wild yeast would be a very narrow definition for what constitutes a natural or not natural wine, because you can make your wine with wild yeast, but you could also be pumping your soil up with all sorts of chemicals and have no accountability for that whatsoever. So really, I think the question to answer for yourself is, do I know where my wine's coming from, and do I trust where my wine's coming from more than is it natural or is it not natural? So bearing that in mind, let me thread the needle a little bit with that. The natural wine movement was started by a group of 4 producers in the Beaujolais region in France who, back in the, I think starting in the kind of 70s, 80s, guys like Dutreuve and Foillard and Marcel Lapierre and Beaujolais, they started creating wines with no added sulfur, creating wines that didn't have any chemicals added in the vineyard, and they were produced with natural yeasts. That was the start of the natural wine movement, just saying a couple winemakers who were sick of watching all their neighbors just do what the catalog said and just pump their wine full of chemicals in order to make it shelf stable and correct and arrive to the consumer how they wanted it to arrive. It also stripped a lot of soul out of the wine in the process. And so these winemakers were the first of a movement, and in the last 20 years this movement's blossomed, and now we have a lot of natural wines and people saying that they make natural wine, whether they do or don't. And we have a lot of political hyperbole thrown at the wine regions that do certain things right, and the producers who do certain things right, and the producers who do certain things wrong. I would say if you want to have this needle threaded for you properly, I really do want to address this more in depth. There's some really great articles on both 750 Daily, one particular written by Amanda Smeltz, who's a New York sommelier. She's a wine director at Estella and a few other spots in New York, and she's written a piece for 750 Daily from about 2 years ago that really threads this needle properly and talks about why natural wine belongs in the fine dining scene. I also think it's just important to ask questions of the producers you drink wine from, and of the importers and the distributors and the wine shops you drink wine from. And Kristen, I love your idea of doing another episode on just natural wine. As you can tell, it's hard to thread this needle properly. I'm doing my best. Joel, to answer your question, oftentimes vintners will make natural wine shelf stable by adding a tiny bit of sulfur at bottling. And then some don't, because they believe that makes their wine conventional as soon as they do that. So again, you could start a big argument about this. I love natural wine. I love certain conventional wines. I think it's really important that the producers are doing as little as possible intervention in both the vineyard in terms of chemical intervention, and then as little as possible intervention in the winery in terms of chemical intervention. The less chemicals and the less products and tricks and treatments that can be used, the better. And I have had some of the most incredible wines I've ever had in my life be wines that are considered from the natural tradition. I've also had really incredible wines that have been made in the conventional tradition. And so I think it's important to take both sides, see them. Not every side is right about every single thing. And it's important to consider other people's ideas, and it's important to have your own ideas challenged and be willing to. So let me see, how are we doing on time? It's hard to tell. I think we are almost done. If anyone has any more questions, I'm happy to answer them, but we're going to sign off in just about a minute and call it good. To those of you who joined us, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you listening to us talk about crunchy red fruit and talk about the Seattle Hospitality Relief Box. Would love your support. And I'm sure the out of work restaurant workers in Seattle would love it too. And would love to hear any questions. If you guys have questions for me, reach out now. That's fine. But also, I'm on Instagram. Jackson Rohrbaugh is my name on Instagram. Just my first and last name. Also, crunchy.red.fruit is our Instagram handle. You can reach out to us here on Facebook. Happy to answer any questions you have and hear what you have to say, and if you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. So cool. If anyone doesn't have anything else, we're gonna sign off, but thank you everyone for your time, and appreciate you drinking wine with me on this fine blue skied Seattle Thursday evening. Cheers, people.